Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Saturday, October the 10th, 2020. On this edition of the Politicrat, Michelle Obama. Her speech from earlier this week, The Closer. That's my name for Michelle Obama. She was, of course, a great First Lady. And in this campaign for Joe Biden, she is the closer. Her full speech, plus key news about voting, upcoming voter registration deadlines, and some good news that you need to be aware of. Coming up next.
This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before election day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
Welcome back. There are just 24 voting days until November 3rd, and it is very important that you vote early. I cannot stress that enough. Voting early is so important. You avoid long lines, at least avoid them on election day, as it were, the final day of this election season. And you also just avoid the risk of any kinds of last-minute issues or problems. Voting early is the key, and as I always say, be sure to vote early, because if we vote early and vote in droves, we will win. There will be a change in the White House and in the state houses and in the legislatures all across this country. And on that very theme, the Politicrat online merchandise store has a special collection of Vote Early t-shirts just for this election season. If you like colorful t-shirts that grab the eye and get the attention of people, then you will want to wear one of the Politicrat Vote Early t-shirts as part of the Politicrat Vote Early t-shirt color collection. There are many different colors, 7 or 8 at least at the moment, and they have Vote Early on the front of the t-shirt with the Politicrat logo on the back. This t-shirt's important not only because it's eye-catching, but really it's important because of the message it sends to everybody. It wakes people up, or at least plants the seed to vote early. You don't have to say a word. All you have to do is put on this t-shirt, walk the streets in your neighborhood, if it's not too cold, and send that message to everybody without opening your mouth. Vote early is the mantra, and it's so important. And if you would love to take a look at these online t-shirts, well, you have to go to the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Make sure you head there right now and buy one of these t-shirts. Heck, buy every one of them if you want. There are more colors on the way, and there's ones for kids coming as well. And everything available in all sizes, from small to XXL. Head to the Politicrat online store right now and take a look and buy the collection, the color collection, the Politicrat Vote Early t-shirt. It is a very important next 24 days. And if anybody has not voted yet, of course, as they say, I urge you to do so. Please do so now. There are over 34 states that are currently voting. So that is the very, very important piece of information that you must be aware of. Most of the country is now voting, and over 8 million people have already voted in this country. That is a staggering amount of people who have cast their vote already. And there is still just over 3 weeks of voting left. There will be more states coming online, if you will, or, being able to vote. More states will be voting in the next few days. We'll have Nevada as one of those states coming up next week, I should say. And that actually will be next week, the 17th, which would be a week from today. So Nevada's going to get going, and there will be a few other states that will join Nevada, and we'll be up to close to 40 states. By the time we get to the end of next week, we will be close to 40 states. So there is no need to leave this until November 3rd. As importantly, if not more importantly than that, voter registration is very important. Voter registration deadlines continue to come. And in fact, today there are at least 2. If you are in the state of Delaware or if you are in the state of Florida, then today, October 10th, is the final day for you to register to vote. And this episode was recorded on October 10th, 2020. So hopefully, those of you in Delaware or Florida registered to vote on this day. It's so important. Today, October 10th, Saturday, is the very last day that people in the states of Delaware and Florida can register to vote for this 2020 general election. So be sure to do that right now. On Tuesday, October the 13th, there are a series of states and the District of Columbia whose voter registration deadlines arrive. This coming Tuesday for these places is the very last day that you can register to vote for next month's general election. So pay close attention to this particular message. If you are in the District of Columbia, that's Washington, D.C., etc. If you are in the District of Columbia, if you are in the state of Maine, if you are in Maryland, if you are in Minnesota or New Jersey or Oregon or Virginia or West Virginia, this Tuesday, October the 13th, is the last day that you can register to vote for the November 3rd general election. Very important. So right now, if you are in those states or in DC, or if you know anybody in any of those places, the District of Columbia, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, Oregon, Virginia, West Virginia, please remind them and tell them that they have got to register to vote. Remind them. Let them know that this coming Tuesday is the last day to register to vote. And I would also say to them, please do not leave it until Tuesday. Because again, when you leave things to the last minute, usually something is going to happen that will throw things off, that may stress you out. I mean, it's stressful enough as it is. I mean, this whole year, not only just this whole year, some people's lives, I mean, life is stressful, period. And there are people's lives who are even more stressful with everything that they go through and that they've experienced. And on a level of voting, people have to be made aware of these very important deadlines. And these deadlines are coming up very quickly. This coming Tuesday in those places, again, I'm going to say this one more time. If you're in D.C., in the state of Maine, in Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, Oregon, Virginia, or West Virginia, this coming Tuesday, October 13th, 2020, is the last day that you can register to vote for this general election on November 3rd. And next Friday, October the 16th, if you are a voter in Nebraska, next Friday, October 16th, is the last day that you can register to vote for November's general election. In the next couple of days, I will be reading out the deadlines for other states that are coming up. So please stay tuned to this podcast. That was an audio from the video that you have to see online. Several celebrities, Chris Rock, Chelsea Handler, Sarah Silverman, Mark Ruffalo, Naomi Campbell, and others, Josh Gad, participated in Naked Ballots, which is an initiative that reminds voters, particularly in important states, in any state, but particularly in places like Pennsylvania, to make sure that they properly put their ballots in the appropriate envelopes and then put that envelope inside the main envelope that you mail back to your state's county election representatives. And that's a very important thing because a lot of ballots get thrown out. I've talked about this issue on a number of occasions here. Naked ballots is something that Pennsylvania will absolutely disregard your ballot on. I mean, they will cancel your ballot. Your ballot will not be accepted if you do not follow the rules. And I've always said here that you've got to be aware of the voting rules in your state, because that's the difference between your ballot counting and it being thrown out. The reason why this initiative has had to happen is because in the courts, Donald Trump's lawyers ended up winning and saying, hey, look, these Pennsylvania voters, they can't just throw their ballot in the envelope. No. They've got to throw it in one envelope, and then they've got to throw that envelope in another envelope. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, that's a naked ballot. And that's subject to all kinds of fraud and all kinds of things. Those are the kinds of arguments that Donald Trump's lawyers were making in Pennsylvania. And as a result of those lawyers winning, and apparently I think that was in federal district court in Pennsylvania, I'm not so sure, but there's not been an appeal, I guess, because the next step would be the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken. I can't imagine that Democrats or that the lawyers for Democrats or for Joe Biden, I can't imagine that they wouldn't appeal that if it were below federal level. So I'm assuming, well, that's not a wise thing, is it? But I guess that is what's happened. And as a result, you've had groups putting out these initiatives. One of them is this series of naked celebrities that you just heard from. You can actually see that video at nakedballots.org. That's nakedballots, BALLOTS.org. It's very funny. And if it sounded funny just now listening to it, it will be even funnier watching it, believe me. It's very funny. But it's necessary. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are necessary, sadly, because we have got people who are up to no good, Republicans up to no good. The whole party is a party of criminality. They're criminals. They know they can't win. They know their policies aren't popular, and they are not. And so the only way they can try to win is by making you afraid, by scaring you, by telling you to hate somebody else, and by cheating and manipulating. Here is Pennsylvania State Legislature Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. He's a Democrat. He appeared last night with Ali Velshi on Rachel Maddow's show. I think these two segments are really important because this is going to lead into something that I'm going to talk about briefly.
Proof that many Americans need tonight, that protest and talking up sometimes works.
Absolutely. I think that this is another example that our voices matter. And for folks who are, getting their mail-in ballots, making a plan to vote, your vote matters. And I think that when we see things going on that we know are absolutely wrong, we have to speak up. And I'm, incredibly grateful that, everybody here at the Maddow team spoke up about what happened. Because if you look at what Leader Benninghoff said, he wasn't ashamed of what he'd done. They weren't upset about what they did. They were just upset that they got caught.
Yes.
And they would do it again.
Let me read that, actually. I'll read it, what he said. It's remarkable, actually. Leader Kerry Benninghoff, the Republican leader and the state legislature said, the common themes from those conversations show you that you understand the select committee was being formed with the best of intentions, but the left and their media allies distorted the image of a bipartisan committee into a nefarious effort on our part to interfere with the upcoming election. Nothing can be further from the truth. The caucus has maintained its commitment to the security and the safety of our election with on-time results for months, end quote. So the left is you and your sort, Representative Kenyatta, and I suppose the media allies are us and our sort.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and nothing was distorted. All we did was tell the truth about what was in the bill. The chairman, Everett, we were going back and forth, and he kept saying what his intent was. But we looked at the language of the bill. And the language of the bill was in direct contrast to his intent. Pennsylvania, as you said in the lead up, is the tipping point state. It is one of the most important states in this election. But the reality is, it's not just what happens at the top of the ticket that matters. Every issue we face is not going to be solved in the Oval Office. And in fact, here, who gets to the Oval Office is going to in large part be decided by what happens in state capitals. And so if folks want to see this never happen again, I would say pick a state house or Senate seat here and get busy, get to work. The president has filed multiple, frivolous lawsuits, including one recently against the city of Philadelphia itself about poll watchers, which he mentioned in the debate, saying very bad things happen in Philadelphia. I'm a party to one lawsuit that's being waged by the Pennsylvania Democratic Party around ballots and mail-in ballots, and he lost much of that at the Supreme Court. But one of the things that the Supreme Court, in my opinion, decided incorrectly was around naked ballots. And so now if folks don't take their ballot, also put it inside the secrecy envelope and put it inside the final envelope, their ballot won't count. And so we're doing everything we can here to make sure people know, use the secrecy envelope, don't send in a naked ballot. But what we're seeing is a pattern here with President Trump. He has been a con artist his entire career, lying and stealing, and now he has enlisted the entire Republican Party in his latest scheme. But what's worse here is that this time his victim would be our very democracy. And so we can't be quiet when things like that happen. The president has tried to intimidate people through tweet and through rally, but we're not going to be intimidated. Folks are going to come out and they're going to vote like never before. And I'm telling you, Ali, what happens here in Pennsylvania at the state level is really going to be critical to this. You have candidates like Julie Slomski in Erie, where Vice President Biden is going to be tomorrow, Brittany Rodas in Central PA, George Scott, who's running for Senate, and Ali, you have Colby Cole, who's running in Western PA against a current colleague of mine who is now going viral for forcing his 5-year-old to smoke a cigar. I mean, I'm not making it up. He had his 5-year-old smoke a cigar, and Colby Cole is running against him there. And we have candidates and current colleagues like Wendy Ullman and Jennifer O'Mara, who are fighting to hold tough seats that we won only in 2018. So if folks can help Pennsylvania House Democratic Campaign Committee, the Pennsylvania Senate Democratic Campaign Committee, if we win the state, not just for Vice President Biden, but if we win the state house, we can stop them from doing this. Because as he said, they can bring this bill up on November 4th, and we have to stop that.
What Malcolm Kenyatta just said, the Pennsylvania state representative, is very important. And this is something that I need to emphasize more, although I think I've emphasized it some, but it needs to be emphasized all the time by a lot of people. Not just myself, of course, but many others of us, and people are doing this. But it is important to understand that your state legislature is really the engine, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Your state legislature is really the engine of what happens locally and in your state, but also affects the national outcome. What the state legislatures do is critical. There are at least 27 state houses or state legislatures that are controlled by Republicans out of the 50 that we have in this country. Voters must and need to be aware of the state and local election picture in their state and municipality where they are. And that means voting up and down the ballot. It is so important to do this. Very important. And one of the important things is to realize that the state legislature affects the policy of what goes on in your state, such as voting, such as the rules, such as the kinds of things that are allowed. And that also includes the governor. Who you have as a governor in your state is very important because it will affect how legislation affects you and what kinds of things governors do. Such as in Texas, Greg Abbott, for example, the governor there, had ordered this week that only one drop-off box location could be had in every county in Texas. And that unfairly disenfranchised or helped to suppress the votes of many black and brown people in Texas. Because in those much larger populated areas and populated counties such as Harris County, where there are many black voters and brown voters, many black voters in particular, in places like Houston, it meant that there were long lines of cars just earlier this week waiting just to drop off their ballot at the only drop box in the entire county. Harris County has over 4 million people for its population. Over 4 million. This was an unfair edict by the governor, and it was challenged in court by Democrats and the work of people like Mark Elias from democracydocket.com. And I can tell you, because of his efforts and other efforts from other Democratic organizations, that order by the governor in Texas was completely overturned by the courts this week. That was a really big decision. Now, no word on whether the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, will appeal, but the fact of the matter is that now, as of right now at least, pending appeal, should it happen, voters in Texas can drop off their mail-in ballot at any drop box location in the state. Any one in their state, in their county, any one. Because they've got to go to their county. I should make that clear. They have to go to their county, and the voter in their county can drop that mail-in ballot off at any county drop box. It's not just one. That makes a huge difference to people who do not have to wait in 3 or 4 or 5 hour long lines in their cars just to drop off a ballot. This is what Republicans do. This is what they've done for years. They have tried to block and suppress your voice. You know, I think that's the way we should start putting this, because your vote really is your voice. That is true. It's not a cliche at all. I mean, it sounds like one, but it's a truth. It really is a truism. Your vote is your voice. And what these Republicans are doing are suppressing your voices. If you start to frame it that way, it becomes a whole lot more powerful, believe me, because that is exactly what they are doing. And so, as I was saying, it is very important who your governor is and who your state legislature is controlled by. In Wisconsin, we've seen Tony Evers, the governor there, who's a Democrat, holding fast against the Republican-controlled state legislature there in Wisconsin. And they have been going back and forth. Executive orders, then they get overturned in courts by the Wisconsin Supreme Court, which is a Republican-controlled court. That's another important thing, who your judges are. And that's why Mitch McConnell has been so successful with getting all of these Republican judges, many of whom, quite frankly, are under the age of 40 or just around the age of 40, to these lifetime federal bench appointments. And many of these people are not qualified. But when you've got a Senate that's controlled by Republicans, hello, do you realize there's a theme here? They are going to rubber stamp a lot of these people, and they have, because they have the majority in the U.S. Senate right now. That, I submit to you, will definitely change in just under a month. But we've got to not rest on our laurels about that. I'll talk about that in a moment. But my whole point is that what State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta of Pennsylvania said is that you've got to focus on what's local. All politics are local, and you've got to focus on the state legislatures. Those are the legislatures that wield the real power in this country. It's really the truth, because the Oval Office is a place where only so much can happen, and happen on the federal level. Now, I blame a lot of this on the corporate news media, because the corporate news media focuses almost exclusively on the federal government. And if you are not someone who watches C-SPAN, or if you are not someone who focuses on the local news every day, it is easy not to be connected. It's easy to be disconnected from what's going on around you, right in front of you, in your own local area or in your state. How many people do you know focus on the politics in their state and what happens? How many of us know on a daily basis? How many of us are aware about what's going on in our state politically? What happened in the state legislature on this day or that day? What bills were passed? What things became law? I mean, how many of us know about these things? Do we know how our state representative voted? And I'm not talking about Congress. I'm not talking about House members. I'm not talking about people in the U.S. Senate or in the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm talking about in your state. So we've got to be aware of these things. And that's why voting is so important, because you can change the composition of your state legislature this November at the very latest. But right now, with these 24 days of voting left in this election season, be very clear that the state legislature wields a lot of power in the state. It really does. And if you've got a Republican-controlled legislature and that legislature decides to block everything like it's been doing in Pennsylvania, and as you heard from State Representative Kenyatta, that the commission that these Republicans in that state legislature had put forth to investigate the integrity of the election as it was going on, thankfully got scrapped. Why? Because people like State Representative Kenyatta raised an almighty fuss, an almighty stink about it within the last week or so. That is the reason why this commission that the Republicans who controlled the state legislature in Pennsylvania were going to do has been scrapped now. Because Democratic politicians like Malcolm Kenyatta and a lot of you, quite frankly, people who are in Pennsylvania who kicked up a real fuss and a stink about this and forced these Republicans to back off and drop that initiative that they were going to have until after the election, if that. But the thing is, we've got to sustain the activism and make the phone calls. The issue is when we stop and when we kind of lay back and when our person has been voted in, we tend to kind of fall back. It happened with Obama. And we get complacent, we get apathetic, and then you get what you get in 2016. So this is a really important voting season here. We have 24 voting days remaining. And what State Representative Kenyatta said there was very important. So we have 24 days of voting remaining. And what you just heard from, we have 24 days of voting remaining. And what you heard there from State Senate Representative, or State Representative, we have 24 days of voting remaining. What you heard from State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta just then was very important indeed. It's very important. So make sure that you pay special attention when you are voting, if you haven't already voted, to all the races on the ballot, not just the one at the top of the ticket and not just the House and Senate. You've got to focus on the things that are affecting you. Your schools. I mean, this is what the legislature has control over. They have legislation that decides things about your schools. So if your kids are in certain schools and there's certain things that need to be changed or altered or improved, and you have a Democratic legislature and they control the state legislature, the chances are, believe me, they are going to do those things to improve the safety of the schools and the parameters upon which kids can go back to school when that time comes. In the terms of this, during this pandemic, to the extent that it happens. But that's my point. It depends on who's controlling your state legislature, and you depend on that by voting. So I just want to really amplify what Pennsylvania State Representative Kenyatta just said. And not only that, you may remember that just about a week ago now, it was actually exactly a week ago in an episode I did, I talked about that same state legislature, which back in, I guess it was April or May of this year, had been meeting, and at least two of the Republican members of that state legislature in Pennsylvania had tested positive for coronavirus and did not tell any of the Democratic members during the meetings that they had. And I played you a few minutes of an understandably angry Pennsylvania State Representative Brian Sims, who was fuming. And I played you that from his Facebook video. And you can still watch that entire video. It's about 20 minutes, 27 minutes long or something. But he absolutely fumed. And rightly so. The kinds of shenanigans that are being pulled by these Republicans, it's unholy, to say the least. You have the Republican senators in the United States Senate who sat by on February the 5th of this year, 2020, and did not convict Donald Trump of these crimes with Ukraine. They sat back and they acquitted him. 52 of the 53 Republicans, Mitt Romney was the only one who said that Donald Trump abused his power. Everybody else, no, nothing to see here. And the kicker is that these cowardly Republicans all admitted off the record or privately to people like Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, the Democratic senator there, that they knew that Donald Trump was guilty. They were just afraid to vote to convict. Let me tell you something. These Republican senators have to be driven out of office. They are complicit with Donald Trump, and they are responsible, quite frankly, as well as he, for the deaths of over 215,000 people in this country from coronavirus. If they had voted to convict Donald Trump, I'm telling you, we would most likely not have had this level of death in this country. But they didn't do that. And here's the kicker. They had been briefed, even during the sham trial held by Mitch McConnell. Remember that? I refer to it now and again. When there was only one camera fixed on the proceedings. And remember when there were no witnesses called? That happened this calendar year. I know it feels like it was 10 years ago. But it was actually roughly 8 months ago now. Just over 8 months ago. This is something that the Republicans in the U.S. Senate are also responsible for. And to the Democrats who are running against Republican senators, I hope that in these final few days of the campaigns, right now, that you start talking about that if you haven't already. That the opponents that you are running against all voted to keep Donald Trump in office after he had been impeached, after there had been overwhelming evidence presented by the House impeachment managers. I really do hope that all of the Democrats running, and I can mention just a few of them off the top of my head, Cal Cunningham, John Hickenlooper, Jamie Harrison, Teresa Greenfield, Sarah Gideon, Mark Kelly, John Ossoff. I mean, I can go down the list. MJ Hagar. And so many others that I've not mentioned. Mike Espy in Mississippi. I hope all of you mention that. It's not the only thing, but it's an important thing because you see what's happened now, right? You see what the costs are. You see the cost of inaction when 100 million people stay home and don't vote in 2016. You see that in action. People voting for these third parties, some of whom of those third parties are aligned with Republicans or are aligned with Putin. Jill Stein, case in point, from the Green Party, which is a disastrous party in this country. The Green Party is Republican-backed. It is meant to enable Republicans. The candidate this time around even admitted that he's getting help from Republicans. But this is what happens when you're complacent, when Obama, you sat back and it was let me take it from here and everybody just sat back. Not everybody. There were some groups like Code Pink who were always out there. I saw them. Listen, I'm here in San Francisco. Obama came out here for a fundraiser, literally 5 minutes away from me at some really, some Tony area, right? Literally 5 minutes away. And Code Pink was right there about maybe 300 yards or so because the police kept them back about, a block or two, maybe more than 300 yards. But they were there, and I was there. I took photos of them. I still may have those photos somewhere. But the point is that there were some activist groups who were saying things about Obama and some of the policies that they objected to. But there wasn't this large activist movement keeping tabs on Obama or keeping tabs on pretty much anybody. But, that's what happens when you get complacent, and you shouldn't. And then that leads to many of you not voting. Not you personally, perhaps. If it doesn't apply to you, then it's not, it doesn't apply to you. But for those of you listening who did not vote in 2016, and I'm not talking about you weren't old enough to vote, and I don't mean because maybe you weren't a citizen, but I'm talking about you were a citizen, you were old enough to vote, and you didn't. And again, I exclude people who may have been ill at the time or had some family issue that was really important. But aside from that, all the rest of you who didn't vote, you see what happened when you didn't, or you voted third party. You see what happened. And then when you have senators who sit back, Republicans sit back and know that the guy is guilty as sin, know that he committed the crimes in Ukraine, know that he abused his power, and they turn around and say, no, nothing to see here. I mean, even Omar Alexander, for God's sake, and he's retiring in January. He'll be out in January. Even he said, well, this is up to the voters. At the time, back in February, he said that. Well, this is up to the voters. That's a complete abdication of your responsibility, Lamar Alexander, as a senator. The American public was not sitting inside Capitol Hill for those hearings and that trial. The American public was at home watching, and they watched you abdicate your responsibility as a senator. You turned tail and ran. And you have the nerve to release a tweet. You can still find this tweet. I'll dig it up and try and find it. And you have a nerve to release a tweet and say, well, this is up to the voters. No, it's up to you. You're a senator. The trial was being held in the Senate. There weren't mini trials going on in every state. I mean, the trial was televised in every state. It was nationally televised. But this is the kind of nonsense that gets us to where we are. So for heaven's sakes, if you're in a Republican-controlled state, if you are, no matter who you are, you vote out these Republicans. This is not what you want as a Republican voter. You don't want to see the rule of law crushed. Because if you did, you wouldn't be living in the United States. You'd be living in Saudi Arabia. You'd be living in North Korea. You'd be living in Russia. You'd be living in some other despotic place where the dictator and the autocrat and the authoritarian completely dominate the show. And Donald Trump is a dictator. You know damn well that if President Obama was in the White House doing the things that Donald Trump was doing, cursing on air, cursing on live television, you know damn well if President Obama was canceling debates, I'm not going to be at the debate, so therefore you guys have to cancel it. And it was canceled October 15th, no debate. Because I don't want to. And you know damn well if President Obama had come down with coronavirus and was in office and did all these stupid videos, you all would not stand for it. You know it. So you don't really care about what the rule of law is. You just care that your guy is in. The world be damned. The country be damned. But I tell you what, I don't think there's that many of you out there. And you know what? I also think that the corporate news media is trying to maximize the minimum. That's what I think is going on. Maximizing the minimum and minimizing the maximum. Making it seem like there's all this all this grand opposition to democracy and all these Trump supporters. There's so many of them. Oh my God. I'm telling you, there's a sizable number. They're very loud, but they are not the majority of the country, not even close. They're roughly 35% of the country, if that. And I know the polls have them at 40% or whatever, and I tell you to please ignore polls. They will be the end of us all. Polls are never a substitute for you not to vote. They're never a substitute for you to vote. You've got to get out there and vote. These senators were all briefed in January during this trial in the Senate, this impeachment trial. They were all being briefed about coronavirus. They all knew, and that includes the 52 Republicans who voted to acquit on abuse of power, who voted to acquit Donald Trump. They all knew about this virus in January. The Democrats knew as well. The House was being briefed. Everybody in Congress and in the Senate were aware of this virus. And I dare say that if Donald Trump knew this on February 7th of this year, as he boasted it to Bob Woodward, you don't think that the Republicans in the House and Senate knew, and the Democrats in both houses knew as well? They were being briefed. And for these Republicans to then acquit this guy, voters, you have got to throw these guys out. Throw these Republicans out of office. My God. Please. I think that you cannot be more obvious than this. These guys are psychopathic.
This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before Election Day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
Welcome back. A couple of other things before getting to Michelle Obama, who I now call the closer. And I will get to that in a moment. And I hope I have touched all the bases here. And if I have forgotten to talk about something that I had aforementioned, promised to mention, I will try to go back to it in a future episode. There is so much to digest. And I thank you for bearing with me and thinking about these things. The goal is not to overwhelm, although, of course, everything is overwhelming. It truly is. I think we can all admit that to ourselves if we haven't previously done so. But even in these times, remember that there have been some really tough times in this country in the past. And I know that is cold comfort saying that because a lot of people do not care about the past. They only are invested in the here and the now. And they only know what they're in right at this moment. And it is a freaking mess for them. And I don't say that with any pleasure at all. So it's very difficult to tell somebody who is in a very urgent and critical situation, about history and, we've had tougher times in the past. Well, some of the people who you might be saying that to who are going through things now might be tempted to either slap you in the face or say to you, F the past. I don't care. Now, it's an understandable response, I think, but history is very important. And I get it that some people don't care about history, and that's a sad thing. We really do have to understand that these things that I speak about in terms of politics and the like do not occur in a vacuum. Now, they just don't. The fact that Donald Trump has destroyed this country and its infrastructure to a large degree did not just start with him. I keep talking about Ronald Reagan in the 80s, and I even go back before that to the 1970s and the Powell Memo with Lewis Powell, who became a United States Supreme Court Justice under Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon got 4 appointments. He got to put 4 people on the freaking Supreme Court bench. U.S. Supreme Court in his first term. 4. In one term. Let me tell you something else. And I didn't quite finish this off from the previous segment. Mitch McConnell was successful in getting all these judges on, these federal judges, because he blocked President Barack Obama for 2 years in terms of the federal judges that Obama would name and would appoint or would name as the nominees. And they were not given hearings. They were not given anything. And you're supposed to give judges or nominees, other nominees, or any nominee that a president selects a hearing. You're supposed to give them Article 1 advice and consent. That's what you're supposed to do. Mitch McConnell violated that. Violated his constitutional oath. Violated his constitutional duties and responsibilities. And did not give President Obama the courtesy nor the respect of having hearings for his nominees to the federal bench. And of course, not to mention, of course, Merrick Garland to the U.S. Supreme Court. And as a result, there are hundreds of vacancies. And then you hear Donald Trump talking about, whoa, Obama left hundreds of vacancies. I can't believe it. Well, he knows better because Mitch McConnell was the one who blocked him. In fact, the GOP blocked Obama for 8 years. So let's make that clear. Mitch McConnell he ain't no great shakes, as it were. Is he astute in terms of his political calculations? Yeah, he's Machiavellian. But he's no genius. This is what raw power is. And in the hands of bad actors or people who have a specific design, power can be lethal. And there's a responsibility to use power, right? They say with great power comes great responsibility. Mitch McConnell did not give a rat's ass about great responsibility. He gives a rat's ass about tax cuts and judges on the federal bench. And no matter what else you say about Donald Trump or Mitch McConnell, one of their quote-unquote legacies will be that they tax cutted for billionaires at every turn, which they did. Mike Pence lied his ass off the other night, by the way. Oh, Biden's going to cut your tax. No. When he's talking about regulation, he's talking about billionaires being regulated if Biden gets in. But the legacy of Donald Trump, apart from everything else we know about his legacy will be, one of them will be putting 200 plus federal court judges on the bench with the help of Mitch McConnell. And the other one will be unprecedented tax cuts for billionaires, where billionaires are paying far less tax than the average person. Not to mention Donald Trump paying $750 in federal income tax in 2016 and 17 when he was president. Oh my God, I mentioned the P word. And not the word that he mentioned on the Access Hollywood tape. This guy, $750 in federal income tax. By the way, the New York Times put out another article on Friday. I'm going to link to it just in case because, with everything going on now, it's very easy to miss stories like this. The New York Times, I think their third story on Trump's taxes and how he didn't pay any and what he was doing and these defunct business deals and these shams and these scams and these cons. You have to admit that you allowed a con man to get into the White House. Not you personally, but you. the voter. We were too complacent, and it's not our fault exclusively. There were so many other ingredients. A poorly run Democratic candidate's campaign, what Russia did, what the Republicans did to suppress 7 million votes. Yes, they did that. And, through Crosscheck, Chris Kobach's program. And then they had that voter commission. Oh, let's have this voter integrity commission. It was a sham, a Republican stunt in 2017, run by Chris Kobach, by the way, in Donald Trump's admin. And by the way, they had to get rid of that voter integrity commission because no one would participate in it. It was so farcical. Even Chris Kobach himself would not submit the data for Kansas, where he was once Secretary of State. He wouldn't even submit that data. The state would not, to his own bloomin' voter integrity commission. So they scrapped the bloomin' thing. It was a disgrace. It was a sham. Just like all of this other crap with Donald Trump lying about voting. And my thing is, where are the Democrats responding to all of this? Where are the Democrats? Where is the messaging? I mean, even the House member Jerry Connolly, I think he's from Wisconsin, said that the Democrats do, and he's a Democratic congressman in the House of Representatives. He said it very clearly. The Democrats don't have any message. Why aren't they responding? Now, I know Joe Biden has done so and Kamala Harris has, but it can't just be the candidates at the top of the ticket for Democrats. It's got to be the party. Tom Perez, where are you? I know you were on with Chris Hayes last night. I know you were. But, Chris didn't ask you about what kind of messaging are Democrats doing to counter all these lies. This guy's lying about your vote, lying. I spoke to, and you've heard it probably if you listen regularly, to the Arizona Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs. And she talked in detail about how strong the infrastructure is in Arizona. It's really one of the best in the country. And all of these infrastructures are strong, or very, very strong indeed. Very strong. And Donald Trump, again, wants you to disbelieve in the institution of voting. It's a voter suppression tactic. But where are the Democrats fighting back against that? That's my concern. That's a problem. Democrats have to start messaging, and it can't just be Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who both, to their credit, made it clear in their debates, vote. There's nothing that this guy can do to stop you from voting. He can't prevent you from going to that ballot box. And Joe Biden was correct when he said that, and he still is today. Kamala Harris said the same thing. Look, vote. When we vote, things change. And that's largely true. And what she really means there, to amplify that, is when we vote in large numbers, things change. And right now, as I said before, 8 million plus people have already voted here. So far, in early voting in this election season, on October 10th, we are over 8 million people already. The Democrats have raised Act Blue, the grassroots, as they call it. Really, I wouldn't say it's grassroots, but the point is, it is kind of grassroots. It's a Democratic fundraising vehicle for people, right? So if you want to donate $5 to Act Blue, then you throw that in to whichever candidate that's out there on the Democratic side. You know that they've raised, in the last 3 weeks alone, 3 weeks since Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, they've raised over $650 million in donations in just 3 weeks. Over $650 million in just 3 weeks. This is something that cannot be overlooked. And these donations are $5, $10, $15, $20. You don't have to be some $1 billion donor. $10, $5, $2.50, for goodness sake. Whatever. People have had enough. People have had enough. Believe me, they have. People have had enough. And the Democrats now must hit this hard. And what I mean is this messaging has got to be developed and has to be all about encouraging people to get out and vote. And I know there are organizations doing it, but it's got to also come from the DNC. All this money that's been raised, can we put a small percentage of that money aside and use it for ads in all of these states? I mean, the secretaries of state can only do so much, and they are doing a really good job for the most part in most of these states of making it clear to people that the voting is safe and strong. You know, you got people in Alabama and Georgia, secretaries of state there who have been really, and Ohio, secretaries of state there have been really dodgy with things. You know, we want to just clamp down on people voting. You know, Ohio had their provision overturned. The Secretary of State wanted some kind of provision. You know, this is just, these Republican secretaries of state and those who I'm referring to in those states, they are a joke. They are basically arms for Donald Trump and any other Republican who wants to steal an election. But I think the Democrats are making a big mistake if they do not start messaging this. All these lies. The media has no problem throwing lies that Donald Trump says every day, every hour, every 30 seconds. They will put up his next lie. Free publicity, just like 4 years ago. And even if the media doesn't cover what the Democrats do, the Democrats should still do it anyway. You've got social media platforms, use them. You've got the internet in general, use it. Message this stuff. You've got YouTube, message it. Use this. Come out and say. The voting process is one that you must participate in. It is safe. It isn't rigged. It is carried out with the greatest level of integrity. I have a ballot. I voted in person, and I followed. There's something called the ballot tracker, and every state tracks your ballot, whether you vote in person or vote by mail. And pretty much every state, there's probably a few that don't, and they're predominant, and they're in Republican areas, surprise, surprise. But the overwhelming majority of these states have a ballot tracking system. You follow your ballot. It is very heavily guarded. It is very safe. And this has been going on for years. And I think it's important, and I can follow my ballot. I've been following it. And you can too, depending on, nearly every state. So don't tell me that this is rigged. And I think Democrats need to state the obvious here. Everybody knows that Donald Trump is lying. Everybody knows when he says, they're throwing out ballots, they're sending them to anybody, anywhere. It's mostly Democrats. Garbage. Nonsense. What's happening is that more Democrats are requesting vote by mail ballots because historically, more Democrats tend to do that. And the vote by mail system has been done for years exclusively in places like Oregon and Utah, Hawaii. Washington State's done it, I think, or for the most part. Ohio has even done it at times. But these other states I've mentioned, they've been doing this for years. Oregon in particular has been something like 20 years, if not more. And everybody knows that in Oregon and in Hawaii and in Ohio and in Utah and they know this, but the country is not aware. And I really think that the Democrats have got to message this, not to panic, but just to put out the message, to counter this. Because there's going to be that 3 to 5% of people who go, maybe there is a rig, maybe it is. I mean, you've got to put out counter messaging. You cannot allow a lie to linger in the ether like this. It's not good. Democrats, if they want to win this election, Democrats and the Democratic Party especially cannot afford to be complacent. Joe Biden's run a very good campaign so far. And he and his team are doing the right kinds of things. But this is not over yet. I want you to try to ignore the erratic and the bizarre. I know it's not easy to, but we need to keep our eye on the prize and stay focused on voting, making sure that people are registered, making sure that we phone bank, making sure that we email or text family, friends, others, getting involved in a campaign remotely, whether it's through phone banking or otherwise text banking, if you will. Whether it's donating to your, the candidates in your state or in another state. Jamie Harrison in a fight with Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, donate to Jamie. Mike Espy trying to unseat Cindy Hyde-Smith in Mississippi, donate to Mike Espy. Teresa Greenfield in Iowa trying to fight off Joni Ernst and unseat her, donate to Teresa Greenfield. John Hickenlooper up against Cory Gardner in Colorado, donate to John Hickenlooper. Cal Cunningham in North Carolina against Tom Tillis, who now has coronavirus, donate to Cal Cunningham. John Ossoff against David Perdue in Georgia. Give John Ossoff some of your money. Please donate to these folks. Donate to Raphael Warnock, also in Virginia, trying to unseat, he and 20 others, trying to unseat Kelly Loeffler in the special election in the Senate in Georgia for the U.S. Senate. I mean, I can go on and on. MJ Hagar in Texas against John Cornyn. Donate to her campaign. Get involved in her campaign. Sarah Gideon up in Maine against Susan Collins. Donate to Sarah Gideon. Get involved in phone banking for Sarah Gideon. Donate to her campaign. And I can go on and on and on. Mark Kelly in Arizona. The husband of Gabrielle Giffords, the congresswoman who had been shot in the head, for goodness sakes, 8 or 9 years ago. Captain Mark Kelly, was in space for a whole blooming year by himself, up in space for a whole year. Donate to his campaign in Arizona to unseat Martha McSally. Get involved in text banking and phone banking for him on the local level. Whichever city you're living in the United States, you've got a state senator or a candidate or whomever, dog catcher or school board or what, donate to them, phone bank for them. Get involved, like James Brown said. Get involved. Get up, get into it, and get involved. Get involved. Get involved. We can do this. We cannot be complacent. We cannot ignore these things that Donald Trump is saying about the voting, the lies. We've got to counter that. You can't let the media is doing his job for him, which is perfect for him. He loves that because he knows the media is going to pick up anything he says. But if Nancy Pelosi says something, she has to fight to get on the air. I think put her on the air live, but when she's holding these press conferences in the mornings, weekly press conferences, they cut away from them, they break from them, they break out of them. Now, granted, she got a lot of attention yesterday for this whole thing about the 25th Amendment and we need to do, and I get it, there's value in having a bill that will examine whether Congress can remove someone who obviously, like Donald Trump, who just is just absolutely out of it, off his rocker, although he's not completely out of it by any stretch. This guy knows what he's doing. He's trying to distract you from his failures and from his murder of 215,000 people. Trust me on that. But what I think Nancy Pelosi and the rest should be doing is messaging against the lies of voting, because voting is an institution. And one thing that Timothy Snyder says, who wrote the book on tyranny, one thing he says is we have to defend institutions. Now, I get it. Look, I'm someone who, institutions in this country have been rife with all kinds of racism and oppression and everything else. Don't get me wrong. And that's something that I continue to fight and continue to point out. And as do you. We all do. And we should keep doing that. We must keep doing that. But voting is our voice. And as I said earlier, your voice is something that the Republicans have attacked forever. For 60 years now. And the Democrats must start saying something about this. You can't just leave it to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. There needs to be messaging around this, especially now, because there are people who are doubting. Although, I'm happy to report that the FBI and others are doing things to protect voting and make it as safe as it can be. Listen to this.
25 days till Election Day, with 8 million having already voted under the threat of foreign interference. Outside Albany, New York, NBC News was given exclusive access to a national security operations center coordinating cyber defenses against foreign and criminal hack attempts.
We see a lot of cyber threats impacting elections as well as other state and local and business organizations as well.
Election defense became a top Homeland Security priority after the Russian hacks of 2016. Now, massive collaboration with the military, the FBI, and NSA.
It blows anything I've experienced in my career out of the waters.
This week, Homeland Security warned cyber threats from both nation-states and non-state actors will remain acute and will likely grow, singling out threats from Russia, China, and Iran to disrupt election infrastructure. How often do you see a probe or an attempt at an attack?
Every single second.
Every second?
The internet's a wild place.
Chris Krebs is the director of cyber and infrastructure security at Homeland. Surprisingly, he vows this year's elections will be the most secure ever.
Look, anything can happen on the turn of a dime. But we're ready. We've secured systems. We've exercised. We've trained. We have incident response plans in place. We're ready for just about anything.
The challenge, coordinating defensive strategies with 6,000 local and state governments nationwide. Matt Masterson is the point man on election security.
We literally have intrusion detection sensors sitting on state networks across all 50 states looking for malicious traffic, looking for malicious activity.
It could take just one county election officer clicking on a ransomware email to allow hackers in. So far, no sign of a coordinated foreign attack, but U.S. Cyber Command is also on the offensive. In 2018, targeting a Russian troll farm, taking it offline.
That really didn't set them back much substantively, but it sent a message to Russia that the United States had that capacity and could do it again.
Importantly, Homeland Cybersecurity says the greatest threat to the election may really not be Russian hacking, but Russian disinformation campaigns to undermine confidence in the election. And those campaigns are very much underway.
That was Tom Costello of NBC News with a report there. I think that is important. It's good to listen to that. It's good news. We need some of that around here. You know, the good news is that we still have 24 days of voting. The good news is that you can register to vote now, still in a number of states. Delaware and Florida, today is your last day to do so. On Tuesday, October 13th, D.C., Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, Oregon, Virginia, and West Virginia, your last day to do so. And then next Friday, Nebraska, October 16th, that's your last day to register to vote. If you want to participate, and I urge you to do so, make sure you register to vote. And for those of you who have voted, participate in phone banks and help others to vote. Educate people. You can do this remotely, as you know. So I think, look, there's some good things going on. Democrats have raised over $650 million in the last 3 weeks, as I mentioned. You have some court cases that are going the Democrats' way. The work of Mark Elias and others at democracydocket.com. I leave that up on my liner notes every episode now so that people can see what kinds of things are going on in the states and places around them and all across the country. Because these Republicans, and Donald Trump in particular, are throwing up all these frivolous lawsuits and challenges in courts to tie up the courts, to try to subvert the system and to exhaust it and to crush it. That's what they're trying to do. Malcolm Kenyatta didn't go into the detail, but that's what the detail is behind what he says. Listening with a third ear. They're trying to gum up the works and exhaust and frustrate you, which is why I say, look, You've got to stay focused. We have to stay focused. These guys are going to try any and everything. And all this clown show that's going on is all distraction. And the media, like dogs to a bone, are running to it. And they're running to it not because they're stupid, but because it's ratings. And they know well that the money flows when you see stunts like this. And they will get big-time advertisers to spend big-time money with them. Donald Trump knows this. He used to be on TV as a quote-unquote reality TV star. And many of you probably watched him on The Apprentice. This guy is a criminal. And so is the Republican Party. Anybody who is exhorting terrorists, white violent terrorists, to act up and kill people, and who does not stand on a soapbox and say, this is not going to be allowed in this country and the law enforcement agencies will act swiftly. Hate cannot be allowed to stand. Violence and terrorism cannot and will not stand in this country. Anybody who doesn't say those words and they are supposedly in the White House, they are traitors to the country right there. And don't get all definitional and say, well, they weren't in a war, so they did. Listen, you swear an oath when you put your hand on a Bible or whatever it is you put your hand on. It could be any number of things. It could be the Torah. It could be the Quran, whatever it is. And you say, I promise to do this and this and this under oath. And then you talk about the era of American carnage is over. And now you have 215,000 Americans dead. You're a murderer. It's at your hands. You knew. You told Bob Woodward. And now we're all paying the price. Families who will never see their loved ones again. People don't care. They're not wearing masks anymore, some of them. That's not the country that we should stand for. We should be standing for something better than that. We got so much work to do, even after this election is over. But the focus must be voting and getting people out to vote. And voting early is the most important thing you can do. You're not hearing a word from Bill Barr. Very quiet this week. Yeah, I know he was quarantining, but you tell me that if this was some kind of, Antifa thing, which it doesn't even exist, really. I mean, come on. I mean, Elizabeth Newman was in the DHS, and she said in her 3 years there was never anything about Antifa that was brought up. There was never any activity that was violent. Nothing. It was all these racist, terrorist, white male hate groups. Yeah, Bill Barr, strangely quiet, isn't he? Never said anything about what happened in Michigan with this alleged plot to kill the governor, to kidnap her and kill her and overthrow the I mean, anytime an attorney general is silent about a plot, alleged or otherwise, to overthrow Michigan government, and you're the U.S. attorney general and you're silent about that? You are already in the land of fascists and rogues. And they are in your government. Government is not the problem. It is the people who are running it into the ground who are the problem. And that's the Republican Party. That's Donald Trump. That is, as I keep saying, the deconstruction of the administrative state. Steve Bannon, again, I hate to quote that racist, but that's the guy who had been saying that is the goal. And he's been doing this in a lot of countries now, Steve Bannon. Going there, talking to people, whipping them up, and trying to destabilize their governments. I mean, you talk about Putin. The guy you should also be focusing on is Steve Bannon. This guy's doing this all over the world. He's traveling from place. This is the guy who in August was arrested for fraud Come on. This guy's a crook. Look, this guy is a crook. I mean, I know he hasn't gone before the court of law yet. This guy is dangerous, and he's a white racist. He is a guy who believes in all this garbage. I mean, Steve Bannon would have certainly been cheerleading these folks yesterday, these guys that got indicted, cheerleading them. By the way, Errol Morris has a movie coming about Steve Bannon. I'm going to take a look at this movie, and I'm going to talk about it and hope to get a conversation with Mr. Errol Morris, who's one of the great filmmakers we have here in the United States. He did films like The Thin Blue Line, which is a tremendous film, documentary. He also did Standard Operating Procedure and a film called Tabloid, and he's done The Known Unknowns, that whole documentary with Donald Rumsfeld. I mean, Errol Morris is one of America's very, very best at what he does and what anyone does in terms of documentaries about politics. He's done some really, and I'm leaving off some of the really other great titles that he has done, the filmmaking that he's done is, he's the one he won the Oscar for, The Fog of War. Robert McNamara, remember when he was I believe the defense secretary? Yeah, Robert McNamara, under Kennedy? Yeah, I think so. So, The Fog of War is the documentary you really should watch. All of these are. But he's done one now, a new one on Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a very dangerous and key figure in all of this stuff that's going on right now. And he's been going to the UK, he's been going to other European countries. And you're seeing this with Orban and Hungary and all. These are these strongmen, authoritarian dictators. And of course, Ruth Ben-Ghiat talked about that. Not about Bannon, but about these strongmen, these authoritarians that are rising up all over the country, all over the world, rather. And in a conversation with me a few months ago, back in the summer, here on this podcast episode, back in the summer, and here on this podcast, I urge you to listen back to it, because I thought it was a really good conversation and very important one. She has a book, by the way, coming in November, next month, called Strongmen. I think it's called Strongmen from Mussolini to the Present, or something like that. Strongmen, Mussolini to Present, something like that. But it's called Strongmen. That's the main title of it, by Ruth Ben-Ghiat. And really urge you to order that book. But the point is that Errol Morris has got this new film coming, and it's called American Dharma, Dharma. I urge you to look out for it when it comes. And I'm going to get a sneak peek of this thing, and I really hope to get Errol Morris on, the great filmmaker who won the Oscar for The Fog of War. Back in 2003, that movie came out. I remember that like it was yesterday. The Fog of War. McNamara recalling, Vietnam and the things that he did, and being there under Kennedy, and interview. And McNamara passed away a few, I think, months or a couple of years after that. But it was a really revealing documentary. I thought it was very well done. And he won the Oscar for that, Morris. But anyway, look, I slightly digress here. Institutions are important. Even if, we need to shape them. That's the thing. We don't need to destroy them. We need to shape them. And in some cases, we do need to actually overturn them. You know what I mean? But not in the way that's being done right now. Voting is sacred. It's the one thing that people have. It is what I call the great equalizer. Having your voice is so important in terms of politics, and of course in literal having your voice. And, there are people who aren't able to speak. But they can vote, Literally, some people cannot speak, and that's something that we cannot lose sight of. They can also go to the ballot box and really be heard, though, with the vote. And that's the one thing that we all have, you and I. If you are a citizen in this country or any other country for that matter, you have your voice. And that is your one thing that you have to say, hey, look, we like you, or hey, look, we don't like you. You have to go. And Donald Trump is threatening that institution mightily. That is what dictators do. They try to destroy the integrity and the apparatus of the one thing you and I have that says, you're gone. We're voting you out. It's important to keep that in your minds. When Timothy Snyder says defend institutions, I think that's what he's talking about in his book on tyranny. That is what he's talking about. Pick an institution and defend it. You cannot just take for granted that that institution is going to survive. You have to lend support to it. And the way you do that is exactly the way that Ruth Ben-Ghiat said on this podcast this summer. And that is to vote. That's how you defend the institution of voting, by actually participating in it, by actually voting. That's how you defend it. You don't defend it by writing in a name of someone who ain't going to win. You don't defend it that way because, again, I'm going to say this again. I've said it on previous episodes, but I'm going to say it here again. A vote for anyone but Joe Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. And that means you're voting to have the voting process eliminated. Trust me on that. You don't want to do that. Now, there may be that fringy 2% of you who are 2% of people in the world, or 2% of people in this country who are like, yeah, we don't need to vote. We just want a dictator. And then, believe me, there are people like that, but they are a small few. What we need is logic, because common sense is not common anymore. But there is something called logic. There is something that says, I can see that there is a sun that exists. I can see that there's climate change because there are fires all over the blooming place. I can see that there is an air that is polluted and toxic. I can see that there are cars on the roads, and there are people, and there's a moon. And that science is what guides us, not tomfoolery and lies. There's logical connections to these things, that you don't walk out without a mask into the open, that you physically distance from people, that you wear a mask. That's logic. When you're told by scientists that masks save lives, then you don't walk around without one unless you espouse the kinds of Jim Jones type beliefs and the death cult that your dear leader is in charge of. I mean, Tony Schwartz, who wrote the book The Art of the Deal, even said what I've been saying forever, is that Donald Trump is acting like Jim Jones. He is Jim Jones. He said that on MSNBC last night. Excuse me, on CNN, pardon me, to Don Lemon last night. Or to, actually it was to John Berman on Anderson Cooper's 360 show last night. That's what he said. I've been saying that on Twitter at the Popcorn REEL forever. This guy's Jim Jones. It's a death cult. I know I'm not the only one that said that, but I have been saying it routinely. I don't want a cookie or a gold medal. I just want this reign of terrorism and this reign of terror by the terrorist-in-chief to end. And the way we do that is by not looking at these stupid polls. The way we do that is by voting, and doing so right now, early. Tell your friends and family, please, be aware of the voter registration deadlines. I will continue to talk about them within the few days of them coming up or on the day of. Delaware and Florida, today is your final day to register to vote. D.C., Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, Oregon, Virginia, West Virginia. Tuesday is the last day you can register to vote, October 13th. Nebraska, for you, is Friday, October the 16th. Next, the closer. You know who that is. She's coming up next. Welcome back. It seems like many moons ago now, but just this past Monday, was it Monday or Tuesday? It's incredible. It seems like a year has passed by in this 1 week. But I believe it was either Monday or Tuesday of this week that the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, who I still consider to be the First Lady of this country, put forth a closing argument for why you should be voting for Joe Biden and, of course, his running mate, Kamala Harris, who did splendidly well, in my estimation, at the vice presidential debate, where she had to debate two people. First Lady Michelle Obama gave, I think, a great closing argument earlier this week, and it's already, I think, been kind of largely brushed over because of all the other crazy things, or the crazy, not the other, the crazy. I mean, no, First Lady Michelle Obama is completely rational. The crazy things that the media love to shine the light on, the shiny object stuff. But what you heard this week, if you did hear it, if you did see it, and I will link to it, is a really good closing argument from First Lady Michelle Obama, who, by the way, was featured earlier this week at the beginning of the week, Sunday, on First Ladies, the CNN series. Next, one of those is coming up tomorrow, Sunday. Jackie Kennedy is being focused on. And I love this series, First Ladies, because it just started with Michelle Obama last week on Sunday. And it focuses on, you know, the ups and downs and what she does, how important she is, integral. And Jackie Kennedy's up next for tomorrow's. So, look, the point I'm making is that this was a 24-minute, 23-minute speech, a conversation that really a monologue, really. You know, she's just talking into the camera and just laying out what you need to know. And she spared no punches at all. She absolutely laid everything out for you, the American voter. She, of course, spoke just a few weeks ago, and I played parts of that, not ironically, but just apropos. I played the day before she gave this new speech. I played a portion of her speech at the Democratic National Convention in an episode the day before. I mean, it's incredible how these kinds of things work in the universe. And you may not be one of these cosmetically geared people like the cosmos and I'm not one of them, but I do believe that things do not happen by accident. And I'm not some guru who, I'm not into all of this, this ethos that tells us that, yes, this is cosmic, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. But I do believe, though, that things do not happen by accident in this world. I'm not saying that every single thing is like that at all necessarily, but I do think that there are things when they happen that do not happen by accident. So the day before she gave this 23-minute speech, I played at the end of an episode of this podcast about 3 minutes or so of the First Lady Michelle Obama at the convention that happened back in August, speaking about the importance of voting and voting out Donald Trump and voting for Joe Biden. And that, I thought, was the best speech of that convention, which, again, people have already largely forgotten. They've already largely forgotten the Republican convention. And by the way, the McCloskeys, those two racist thugs, that white couple that was pointing guns at peaceful protesters who were walking past their premises. And by the way, it was the McCloskeys who broke their own gate, according to the indictments. They got indicted, yes. That couple, that racist couple that appeared at the RNC via video. Oh my gosh, be afraid, white people. Be terrified of those hordes of black and brown and white people, by the way, who also have joined these protests of Black Lives Matter and still are doing these protests right now in October. Of course, the media is not going to cover it, but they're still protesting, folks, in Louisville, in Portland, and all over the country. I said that these protests were going to continue through right to the election. And they are. Jonathan Price, saw what happened to him. Murdered by the cops. They arrested that white cop who killed him. More than I can say for what Daniel Cameron, the AG of Kentucky, has ever done. And Breonna Taylor's killers, not indicted at all for anything that they did to her. Murder her, assassinate her. That's what they did to her. Assassinated her. And they never were charged for it. Michelle Obama has reminded everybody how important this election is. And here is her reminder in what was a really great message. Michelle Obama truly is the closer. And in this speech, given earlier this week for Joe Biden, she closes.
Believe it or not, the election is right around the corner. Votes are already being cast. And if you're still deciding who to vote for or whether to vote at all, I wanted to take a moment to remind you what's at stake and to urge you to make a plan to vote today. Because let's be honest, right now our country is in chaos because of a president who isn't up to the job. And if we want to regain any kind of stability, we've got to ensure that every eligible voter is informed and engaged in this election, because the stakes are on display every day, not just in the headlines, but in our families. If you're a parent like me, you're feeling the consequences of this president's failure to take this pandemic seriously, from his constant downplaying of the importance of masks and social distancing to his relentless pressure on schools to open without offering a clear plan or meaningful support to keep students and teachers safe. Look, our daughters are in college now, and luckily they're taking classes from home this semester. But in just a few weeks since schools have resumed, many of their friends who returned to campus have either tested positive or are living with someone who has. Yes, it's anecdotal, of course, and everybody wants their kids back in school as soon as it's safe. But as a mom, it is frightening thinking about all these young people who were just our babies yesterday, quarantined alone in dorms or apartments with little or no support as the disease continues to spread, unable to come home if their symptoms get worse. Just imagine the toll that worry is taking on families across this country. Yes, thankfully, there's some relief in knowing that most cases in young people are mild. And I pray every day that no one faces longer-term consequences to this disease. But the truth is, we just don't know yet. And we simply cannot trust this president to tell us the truth about anything. Meanwhile, parents with younger kids are dealing with another set of stresses, from grade schoolers who want to learn but struggle to connect with their teacher through a screen, to schools that open and close with little advance notice, leaving everyone in an endless cycle of uncertainty. Too many parents are still juggling 2 jobs and multiple kids without any support, not to mention the millions of families anxious about making rent or getting internet access or affording childcare. It's painful to think that months into this crisis, this is still where we are, with no clear plan, no peace of mind. And the worst part is, it didn't have to be like this. Look around the world. So many other countries aren't experiencing this level of extended suffering and uncertainty. These countries were hit by the same virus as we were. They had the same kind of resources to contain it as we did. But what they didn't have to contend with was this president, a man who had every resource at his disposal, the finest medical experts, our best intelligence, and yet ignored all the advice and failed to produce a plan to provide enough tests for worried families or protective equipment for our healthcare workers. A man who knew how deadly this virus is, but who lied to us and told us it would just disappear. Who, in the greatest crisis of our lifetimes, doubled down on division and resentment, railed against measures that could have mitigated the damage, and continues to hold massive events without requiring masks or social distancing, knowingly exposing his own supporters to a dangerous virus. Today, more Americans have died from this virus than died in the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, and Korea combined. Take all those lives bravely sacrificed and double it. That is roughly the scale of this tragedy. And our commander-in-chief, sadly, has been missing in action. And his willful mismanagement of the COVID crisis is just one example of his negligence. When wildfires rage out west, he says nothing for weeks. When Americans of all backgrounds peacefully protest racism and police violence, he disparages them, yet eggs on heavily armed militias. When our heroic young men and women answer the call and give their lives for our country, he calls them suckers and losers and publicly mocks Gold Star families and prisoners of war. All this from someone who, as a wealthy, connected young man, avoided military service. And with millions and millions of Americans left reeling from the worst job losses in recent history, with small businesses closing their doors for good, he and his party dragged their feet to provide necessary relief for people whose lives have been decimated under his watch. 7 months later, he still doesn't have a plan for this virus. 7 months later, he still won't wear a mask consistently and encourage others to do the same, even when those simple actions could save countless lives. Instead, he continues to gaslight the American people by acting like this pandemic is not a real threat. And yet, even in the face of all this incompetence, Americans keep digging deeper, finding new reserves of strength, doing whatever it takes to get through this. That's one of the beautiful things that has given me hope over the past 4 years. Our country's resilience, from the essential workers keeping us safe, to the doctors and nurses caring for our loved ones, to the teachers and childcare workers doing everything they can for our kids. Americans have stepped up to answer the call. It's not too much to ask our leaders to rise to the occasion as well. Thankfully, we have the chance to elect a president who can meet this moment, a leader who has the character and the experience to put an end to this chaos, start solving these problems, and help lighten the load for families all across the country. And that leader is Joe Biden. After seeing the presidency up close for 8 years, maybe the most important thing I've learned about the job is this: how a president focuses their time and energy in office is a direct reflection of the life they've lived before entering the White House. A president's policies are a direct reflection of their values. And we're seeing that truth on display with our current president, who has devoted his life to enriching himself, his family, and other wealthy people he truly understands, cutting taxes for the rich and big corporations, cutting regulations that protect regular families from getting taken advantage of by people like him, cutting his friends loose from prison time. He boasts about gains in the stock market, but when you look at the lives of regular folks, whether it's creating blue-collar jobs, making healthcare more affordable, protecting the environment, keeping our families safe from gun violence, let alone the coronavirus, there's nothing much to brag about. By contrast, Joe Biden has lived his life guided by values and principles that mirror ones that most Americans can recognize. I know Joe. He is a good man who understands the struggles of everyday folks. When he was a kid, his dad lost his job. His family had to move to find work. As a young man, he quit his job at a lucrative law firm to serve as a public defender, protecting the rights of those who couldn't defend themselves. He continued to serve this country even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, losing his wife and baby daughter, later in his life, his eldest son, relying on his deep faith in God to carry him through, never growing cynical, and always willing to see the humanity in us all. It is that spirit, that determination that will make Joe the kind of president we need right now, one who will continue to put the needs of the country before his own, to ensure that all families can get back on their feet and our economy can get back on track. And he'll start by getting this virus under control, working with a broad coalition of leaders to develop a national strategy that will include mandatory mask wearing and free testing. He'll get schools the resources they need to sort through this confusion. He will listen to doctors and scientists to make sure that any vaccine will be safe, effective, and available to everyone. And Joe Biden will also get back to work solving problems that this president has ignored or made worse these past 4 years. Joe will give working families a tax credit for childcare. He'll roll back those tax cuts for the rich and instead help small businesses and working families. He'll lower the cost of prescription drugs and give every American access to affordable health coverage. He'll work to restore trust between police and communities of color and address the racial discrimination that has plagued us for far too long. He will protect our planet. He will invest in our schools and bring people together to get something done, even across our differences. And we can trust Joe Biden to name Supreme Court justices who follow in the footsteps of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, judges who understand that justice and equality aren't theoretical ideas, but concrete matters that affect our health care, our livelihoods, and our bodies. This is the kind of leader our nation deserves. A leader who is tested and ready to dive right in. A leader who will lock arms with his terrific running mate, Kamala Harris, and bring us out of this downward spiral. A leader who will help heal this nation, and instead of tearing people apart, he will bring people together. It's a simple choice, really. A chance for a fresh start or 4 more years of this. But let's be very real. America is divided right now. And a lot of people are being sold lies from those who want to get rich or stay in power, or sometimes both. And as I've said before, we must all empathize with those who might not look like us or vote like us. We have got to put ourselves in one another's shoes. Look, think about it. You've worked hard all your life, and for too long you've watched the rich get richer. You've lost your farms and your livelihoods to corporate greed. You've seen your beloved towns shattered by joblessness. You've watched families destroyed by drug addiction and mental health challenges. All of this long before this virus hit. And it is frustrating to hear some folks say that you've been the beneficiary of privilege, that the color of your skin gives you a head start. That is the reality for far too many hard-working, decent Americans. But right now, the president and his allies are trying to tap into that frustration and distract from his breathtaking failures by giving folks someone to blame other than them. They're stoking fears about Black and brown Americans, lying about how minorities will destroy the suburbs, whipping up violence and intimidation, and they're pinning it all on what's been an overwhelmingly peaceful movement for racial solidarity. It's true. Research backs it up. Only a tiny fraction of demonstrations have had any violence at all. So what the president is doing is once again patently false. It's morally wrong. And yes, it is racist. But that doesn't mean it won't work. Because this is a difficult time, a confusing time. And when people hear these lies and crazy conspiracies repeated over and over and over again, they don't know what to think. With everything going on in their lives, they don't have time to fact-check falsehoods being spread throughout the internet. And even reasonable people might get scared. And the one thing this president is really, really good at is using fear and confusion and spreading lies to win. Look, I get it. But I also feel it. As a Black woman who has, like the overwhelming majority of people of color in this nation, done everything in my power to live a life of dignity and service and honesty, the knowledge that any of my fellow Americans is more afraid of me than the chaos we are living through right now, well, that hurts. It hurts us all. It is a heaviness that sits on our hearts. So I want to appeal for some empathy here too. I want everyone who is still undecided to think about all those folks like me and my ancestors, the moms and dads who worked their fingers to the bone to raise their kids right, the teenagers who wear hoodies while working hard to get their diplomas, the millions of folks who look like me and fought and died and toiled as slaves and soldiers and laborers to help build this country. Put yourselves in our shoes for just a moment. Imagine how it feels to wake up every day and do your very best to uphold the values that this country claims to hold dear: truth, honor, decency, only to have those efforts met by scorn, not just by your fellow citizens, but by a sitting president. Imagine how it feels to have suspicion cast on you from the day you were born, simply because of the hue of your skin. To walk around your own country scared that someone's unjustified fear of you could put you in harm's way. Terrified of what 4 more years of this kind of division might mean for the safety of you and those you love. Living with the knowledge that no matter how hard we try, how much good we do in the world, there will be far too many who will never see our humanity, who will project on us their own fears of retribution for centuries of injustice and thus only see us as a threat to be restrained. And we know what happens next. A racial slur from a passing car, a job promotion that never comes, a routine traffic stop gone wrong, maybe a knee to the neck. Racism, fear, division. These are powerful weapons, and they can destroy this nation if we don't deal with them head on. So I want to ask every single American, no matter what party you normally vote for, to please take a moment to pause. Click off the news. Think about how you felt over these last 4 years, how quickly things have turned. And then think about what the next 4 years could mean for our country's future. The message we will send to our children about who we are and what we truly value. Think about what would possibly compel you to accept this level of chaos, violence, and confusion under this president and be willing to watch our country continue to spiral out of control. Because we can no longer pretend that we don't know exactly who and what this president stands for. Search your hearts and your conscience, and then vote for Joe Biden like your lives depend on it. Look, you all know that politics has never been my thing. But to all the young people out there, to all the Black and brown folks, to anyone who feels frustrated and alienated by this whole system, I get it. I really do. But in the face of all of the frustration and alienation I've experienced throughout my life, never once have I considered not voting as a viable option. Not once have I thought about foregoing a right and privilege that so many before me fought and died for. Not once have I let someone else's ignorance and hatred keep me from doing my duty as a citizen. Because I know we don't have the luxury to assume that things are going to turn out okay. We cannot afford to withhold our votes or waste them on a protest candidate. One of these two men will be president. And only if we vote for Joe Biden with power and with passion will our voices even have a chance at being heard. Because folks who are perfectly content with the status quo, who are quite happy with what's been going on these past 4 years, trust me, whether they say it out loud or not, they will vote too. So we can expect that this election will be won by the slimmest of margins, just like 4 years ago. A handful of votes per precinct in Pennsylvania or Arizona or Wisconsin or Florida or anywhere else will make all the difference. So we have got to make our plan to vote this instant. We've got to vote early so we have the peace of mind to know that our vote for Joe Biden is in the bank. We've got to go to iwillvote.com right now to request our absentee ballots and send them back immediately, or take them to a drop box or an election office. If we choose not to vote by mail, we've got to find out where and when we can vote early in person and show up the minute they open their doors. We've got to set aside time to vote on Election Day so that we don't get too busy. And we've got to reach out to others, starting in our own backyard. As I like to say, we got to tend our own gardens. That means reaching out to all those folks who we might not be able to count on voting. You know who they are, the folks who might not be as tuned in as we are. Make sure they request their ballots too. Make sure they know where their polling location is. Take them with you to vote if you need to. And make sure you text BELIEVE to 30330 to get involved today. Work like this may not feel as impactful as attending a protest, but trust me, it is absolutely the most important thing that we can do right now to save our democracy. It's simply what needs to be done. And that's what we've been doing for months. Just getting the job done. No matter the stress, no matter if something feels out of our control, because that's who we are as Americans. That is what we do. And right now, we've got a chance to start getting things back under control, to restore some stability and integrity and soul in this country. It is within our grasp. And that's what keeps me going. Thinking about a time not all that far off, with a new president in the Oval Office, a trustworthy, honest, stable leader with a clear plan for controlling this virus and getting our economy back on track, with meaningful support for families and schools, with competence and maturity instead of chaos and confusion. It is possible. It really is. But only if we vote for Joe Biden in this election. We have all been working so hard to keep ourselves and our families afloat. And we deserve a president who will do the same. Thank you for listening. God bless.
First Lady Michelle Obama, thank you so very much to you. Michelle Obama, I think this country owes you a debt of gratitude. I think that by far, First Lady Michelle Obama is the most valuable player, if you will, to coin a sports phrase in this election. I really do think so. People may not look at it that way, but I certainly do. She has made 2 speeches now that I think are very important, even more important than her husband's, by the way. Because people trust Michelle Obama. It's not that they don't trust Barack Obama. I mean, he is very favorable. His likability is very favorable. But Michelle Obama is even more popular than Barack Obama. She is even more popular than her husband. She is honest. I mean, he is, I'm not saying that he is not, but she has said many times she doesn't like politics. She hates politics. I mean, how honest can you be, right? That's about as honest as it gets. Someone who was the first lady of this country for 8 years, and she says that she hates politics. How many people who served alongside a president would ever say that? I mean, she served the country, and she's admitted that she hates politics. And people trust Michelle Obama. She has a fan club far and wide, not just in this country, but around the world. And not only that, the white suburban women, a great many of them really like her. And they're big fans of hers. And that's also obviously true of many other types of women. Latinas, Black women, Asian women, Native women, they're all, not every single one, but the vast majority, and men too, are big fans of hers. They like her. Of course, there's some who don't. But Michelle Obama really is the closer. And that speech you just heard provides real, full evidence of it. I have nothing but fulsome praise for the First Lady, who has conducted herself at all times with the kind of decency and honesty and regalness that position demands. She lifts people up. She believes in people and in the goodness of people. She inspires people. She leads. She has a great book out called Becoming. You know about it. It was made into a Netflix movie. She has her podcast out. And she's on Twitter, @Michelle Obama. Please follow her. Michelle with 2 L's. in case you didn't know. I know there's different ways to spell Michelle. Some women spell it with one L, but Michelle Obama has two L's in her first name. She is on Twitter. Please follow her. Please, please, please. And do listen to her podcast. It's really good. She is really honest about everything. And read that book, Becoming, which I gave away, I think, when it came out a year or so ago, 2 year, whatever. And her husband has a book out, by the way, coming out next month. So, gosh, I can't, the name of the book escapes me at the minute, but you can go and search it online. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to check out the Politicrat online store for these great t-shirts. You're going to love these t-shirts. These Vote Early t-shirts, they are the greatest. Well, they are really good. I'll put it that way. You will get compliments. Even if you are not looking for them, if you don't want them, and I'm not searching for compliments, trust me. People come up to me every time wearing these I wear these t-shirts, and they always say, the people who do come up to me, and I am distanced from them, and they are wearing masks, that's a great t-shirt. I like it. Love the t-shirt. Great. Every time without fail. And it has a message on it that says vote early. I don't know how much better it can get than that when you've got people telling you, I love that shirt. Great. Get yours now, please, at the store at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.
All right, this just in. A major setback for President Trump's campaign in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. A federal judge has denied a request by Trump and the Republican Party to make ballot drop boxes in Pennsylvania unconstitutional. CNN's Kristen Holmes joining me now by phone. So, Kristen, what else did the judge say?
Fred, this is a huge loss for the Trump campaign and for Republicans, and it should not be understated that this will shape the way that votes are counted, both by mail and in person in this critical swing state. So you talked about this, the drop boxes. That is a key part of it. Republicans had argued they were unconstitutional. The judge said no. Signature matching, another big issue with mail-in voting. Republicans had tried to argue that they couldn't have just similar signatures, that they had to be exactly the same as what the state had on record, which we know actually ends up having making a lot of ballots be rejected. A judge overruled on that. And the last one was on poll watching. Republicans had argued that people should be able to be poll watchers outside of the counties that they live in. And of course, as we know in Pennsylvania, there are urban areas that are more Democratic. They were arguing that people in red districts should be able to come into those districts, et cetera. So again, overruled on all this. And one very important thing to note, this judge who made this decision was appointed to the bench by President Trump. So there's no real politics at play here, as we usually hear from the campaign. They say this was an Obama judge or this is a Democratic judge. So that's going to take away that argument from them. I do want to note that there are still cases in front of the Supreme Court that have been asked to be reviewed by Republicans in the state. One of them is involving the counting of absentee ballots. A lower court judge said that it was okay for state officials to count ballots up to 3 days after the election if they had the ballot postmarked. Now, Republicans in Pennsylvania had said that's not fair. They want to bring this to the Supreme Court. So obviously it is a never-ending battle. And Fred, as we've talked about, this is a huge part of the Republican strategy this election to keep things tied up in court.
Right, and of course we'll see what the Trump camp plans to do now that this judge has rendered this decision. And in this, just to underscore what you said, Kristen, that he was appointed, this judge, Judge Nicholas Rengen, was appointed by Trump. And in this 138-page opinion, he says, while plaintiffs may not need to prove actual voter fraud, they must at least prove that such fraud is certainly impending. They haven't met that burden. At most, they have pieced together a sequence of uncertain assumptions. Pretty strong language coming from the judge there. Kristen Holmes, thank you so much. We look forward to more reporting on that. Appreciate it.